Yes, my name is Robin. So nice they named me twice. I am the CEO of MSP Success Magazine and a little company called TMT. How many of my TMT family do I have out there? Come on, make some noise. Come on, they're the sexy ones. The sexy ones with the money, all right? Okay, very cool. All right, before we get started, I want to really quickly say a big thank you to the DattoCON team, the event team. You guys have been great, right? Give them a round of applause. And Kaseya for putting on this event and allowing me to host this. It is a great honor and privilege that, that they're allowing us to host this on stage and sponsoring the Titans of the industry. This is a new award that we are giving away to true titans of our industry. And a titan, by definition, is someone of great intellect, of strength, of power. And I think after I've interviewed these gentlemen, you guys will 100% agree that they are titans of our industry. Now, before I bring them up really quick, they have been nominated by Kaseya to be Titan of the industry. And it is going to be up to all of you, though, to vote and tell us who you think should be the Titan of the industry in 2023. All right, so a couple quick things, if you guys could bring up those slides for me, please. If you want in-depth interviews with the people that are up here on stage, the one I haven't done yet is UDT with Henry Fleches, and Jesus Pena is here today for him, but all the other interviews and that one will be coming up. If you want to hear in-depth interviews on how they grew their MSP, what they think the trends of the industry are doing, how they're hiring people, and dealing with all the challenges you guys are dealing with inflation and competition, and again, the tough labor market, you can go to mspsuccess.com/secrets, and you can get instant access. So grab your phone really quick. You can either use that QR code or go to that URL and get those interviews, because you won't want to miss that, okay? Now, the other thing I'm gonna give you here, the next slide, please, is how to vote. And we are live streaming this on the interwebs, so on Facebook, YouTube, on a landing page on MSP Success Magazine. And at the end of this, you are going to be asked to vote for who you think should be Titan of the industry. So make sure you write down the gentleman's name that we have, that we're gonna be interviewing, because I want you to do that immediately after we're done. We're going to tally the votes, and then later today, we're going to do an award ceremony and give away the Titan of the Year. All right? So you guys excited to bring them up? Come on now, a little energy, baby. Come on. All right. Okay, so we will bring them up, no particular order. First up, we're going to have Rob Stevenson, CEO of Thrive Networks. Come on up, Rob. Right there. All right. Next, we'll have Mr. Will Slappy of IT Voice, CEO of IT Voice, in the cowboy hat, rocking it, baby. All right. Next up, we've got Ryan Vespi, CEO of VC3. Jason Waldrop, President of Managed Services at Red River. And standing in for Henry Fleches, we have Jesus Pena, who is the Executive Vice President and Chief Experience Officer of UDT. All right? Very good. All right, so why don't we start out? How many of you are familiar with these gentlemen and their companies? Sort of, kind. How many of you are familiar? Raise your hand so I can see. Okay, so not many. All right, so why don't we start out, Rob, with you, and just share with everybody a little bit about your company, and share whatever you feel comfortable with in revenue, size, locations, et cetera.
Sure. So Thrive, we have about 1,250 employees worldwide. We'll do roughly about $300 million in revenue this year, about $74 million of EBITDA, inclusive of an acquisition that we have under agreement right now. Most of our clients and operations are on the East Coast of the United States, very large financial services business, about $125 million financial services practice. But we've also expanded quite a bit in the last couple of years. We're in Austin, Texas. We're up in Toronto, going the other direction into Europe and Asia. We're in London, all throughout the UK. We're in Singapore, Hong Kong, Sydney, Australia. About 91% recurring services, very large, cloud and security practice. Over half our revenue is security and cloud. We have our own SOC, and excited to be here and participating. Thanks.
All right, great, thanks. All right, Will.
Will Slappy with IT Voice. So father started the company back in '83. I took over running it in 2014, and we started the acquisition journey in 2019. So we've 7X'd the company in the last 4 years. Now have 14 total locations, combination of 18 acquisitions. So just in the US, we haven't gone international like Rob over here, but everywhere from California to Florida to Wisconsin and a lot of others in the middle home office in Alabama. We're about 200 employees, about 50 million in terms of total revenue. 4 main lines of business. Obviously, managed IT is the biggest driver. We also have voice, cloud, and security as well. So we're excited.
Okay. Ryan?
Yeah, Ryan Vespi, VC3. VC3 started out in Columbia, South Carolina, and now we expanded across 35 states and 8 provinces. We'll do about 150 million in revenue this year with EBITDA north of 30 million. We do about 80% in recurring revenue, and kind of one of our unique qualifiers is we focus on local government. So we take care of 1,100 plus cities and towns across the country, and we have state league endorsements with 9 states currently.
All right.
Hi, my name is Jason Waldrop. I run the managed service business at Red River. At Red River, we've got about 800 employees. We'll do a little north of $1 billion this year. About 70% of our business is public sector, and most of that is federal. So I can relate to the regulated industry stuff. Kind of three lines of business at Red River. Our technology solutions business, which is sort of our hardware, software resale business. We have the business that I run, the managed services business, which interestingly, I built an MSP, sold it to Red River, and now run that P&L for the company. And then we have something we call government technology services, which is like a government services programs business. So we're growing and acquisitive and excited to be here.
Great. Jesus Pena, UDT. A little bit like Jason's business, we have also 3 markets that we serve. We're SLG, education, commercial. We're over 450 million in revenue. The only difference between all of them and myself is that we are privately, we don't have any outside capital coming into UDT. So it's a little bit of a different perspective. Probably a lot as pain, or maybe not as much pain, but some pain as related to the growth, but continue to focus on acquisitions and growth organically and through acquisitions. So.
All right. Well, I'll start this question for you, Jesus, because it was interesting, and I think I know not everyone out there is really itty bitty, but a lot of the people who are here, obviously not as large as your MSPs, and I was wondering how far do you think most MSPs can make it organically before they should start thinking about private equity or even merging with another MSP or selling? And obviously, 450 million is your answer, I guess, right?
Well, yeah.
Okay.
Look, I don't think there's a specific formula that says this is where you should be at. You have to have a plan, right, to be able to execute to that plan. The reality of it is what is it that you're trying to accomplish? Our journey has been 28 years now in the making. We started off as a hardware reseller, we turned into a VAR, then we moved to MSP. The reality of it is you're going to get to a plateau where you have to get outside money, because if you're watching EBITDA and you're watching revenue, at some point those two start mixing a little bit. So UDT at this point has actually been entertaining. We're not there yet, but we've been entertaining because our goal is to get to $1 billion company. So at any given time around there is where
It's about 400 million.
some people do it a lot less.
Give or take.
It also depends on the speed you want to grow. Right?
Right. No, I understand. Yeah. Anyone? Yeah. Do you want to? Yeah.
I mean, I can, from my perspective, businesses grow in cycles, and you'll have rapid growth periods, and then something happens in the business and you need to invest in SG&A to kickstart the next growth cycle. And so in my case, we got to a point where we'd done that 4 or 5 times, and you get to $100 million, and it's the next investment leg. I had trouble going back to my wife and saying, we're not going to make any money again this year. So that was when we said we're going to go out and raise and run a process, and we didn't know if we were going to take private equity or debt or do a strategic, and we ended up doing a strategic deal.
All right. So how big do you think an MSP can get organically, in your opinion, then?
Yeah, well, I think it's really, it's that question, it's the stomach for reinvestment. I don't know that there's a magic number, you know, like at some point you got to add a sales force, at some point you got to add back office, at some point you got to do geographic expansion, and each one of those requires investment, and it's just about, you know, how willing you are to throw back in at each one of those cycles. So, I mean, realistically, can somebody get out past 200 or 300 million in pure recurring services without taking on private equity investment or something? I think that's very difficult, okay? Possible, but very difficult.
Well, and also not only the financial aspect, but you have the management aspect, which I think is probably more difficult because you've got that, you know, sub 10 employees where you're the only manager. And then to go from that to like 25 employees is a huge jump where now you have to have other managers who are taking responsibility for things. And then when you go from that up to 50, and then you get actually an executive team, and then you go up to 100, you know, 200, where now you've got layers of management. And the management style of running a 10-person MSP is significantly different than, what do you have, 1,300 employees? Is significantly different. So some of that comes down to what do you want to do as the MSP leader. Some people, if you want to be in the nitty-gritty serving your customer, like that may also be a cap for you in terms of what size that you want to grow to, and that may cause you to want to become a part of somebody else that's bigger, that you can have that role. So I think the management difference is a significant component because there's a big difference as the sizes jump. It's also really hard to jump from one to another, and I think that's what you were talking about, is that like it takes a lot of capital and SG&A, you know, investment to get from these different levels. It's not exactly linear. Like you got to jump from each to the next, which is part of the reason why a lot of us has done acquisitions, because you can instantly jump versus trying to organically grow through those periods is very difficult.
I think the most important thing that you said there is MSP has to have owner has to have a plan. It really comes down to what all of you guys want to do. You can run a very successful entrepreneurial business, probably make you know, 7 figures. You could have a legacy plan to hand it off to your employees. You could have family members you want to hand it to, and it's a very good business that I think will carry on for 10, 15 years at least as a profitable, well-needed business. So there's nothing wrong with that. I think then there's the next layer of, hey, I'd like to grow this as much as I can organically. Maybe you can go out and take on mezzanine capital, venture debt, something that I did in a former business years ago. We took a little business that was an ISP in like 2000 and built that into a data center, managed services cloud provider, but we took out $1 million of venture capital, mezzanine. So about 14% interest, and they took a 1% warrant in our business. By using that capital, we hired 5 salespeople and quickly took the business over the next 7 years from about $1 million of revenue to $20 million of revenue. Then we said, all right, in order to continue funding and growth, we had to go private equity. But there's a lot of different ways to do it. The main thing is know your plan and don't get stuck in the middle. Well, I'm going to sell, maybe I'm not going to sell. Maybe I'll build it, maybe I'll keep it myself. Really try to lay out a concrete plan. Then it's easy to map out the steps in between.
Yeah, the last comment I'll make around that is around when people really truly want to start M&A activity. And the interesting part, over the last 5 years, we've seen so much M&A activity within our industry. And it's almost getting to a point where it's an unfair advantage if you have a capital partner, because you have capital behind you, you can pay actually a higher multiple than somebody that's kind of cash strapping this themselves, which becomes difficult. Because based on size, you get a different arbitrage, a multiple, and those things become really important. So it is a bit of an unfair advantage when you have a capital partner. So you need to think through that. You still can get M&A deals done, but most of the deals that come through our table, we have 4 LOIs on the go right now, is owners that are like, I want to grow, I kind of want to be my own platform, but when I'm starting to look at what I need to do to actually acquire businesses and what I need to pay for them and how do I fund them, it becomes really difficult. So their thought process is, I'm just going to join a group, I'm still can have an opportunity to get equity and grow my share, but I can take and mitigate some of that risk and not have to do it on my own.
Okay.
Well, and while you're doing that, you got to run the business too. You know, that's one of the most difficult parts, which is great about having a capital partner. Our capital partner does a lot of the due diligence for us, so I can spend the majority of my time running the business, because if you're trying to do both at the same time and with a small team, like that's difficult.
You're going to implode, yeah. Yeah, okay. So there's a lot of talk about M&A, obviously, in our industry. All of you are looking to acquire MSPs, right? So everybody's always looking for who's going to give me the most money. I think, you know, that's kind of like the thing. They think money, right? Big dollars. Is there anything else in addition to that that they should think about, like when they go to merge, whether they're going to merge or they're going to sell and drop the mic and leave? I mean, what else should they be looking for in that company that they're going to sell to?
If you want to, I could take the first step. First of all, it's culture, right? You got to look at culture, because you could be here today, you're not going to be happy tomorrow, then whatever you work for is done. There's no legacy, there's nothing. But I think something that a lot of smaller MSPs or even smaller organizations that are falling into this MSP world or are trying to move to that tend to not think about is that second bite of the apple. Because usually when you run in and you work into yourself into a platform of some sort, the first transaction is usually the smallest transaction. So don't be short-sighted by saying, hey, you know, I'm gonna make a couple $1 million here. The reality is what's coming out at the end, if you run into a good platform, any one of these here are gonna be able to provide you that second or third bite at the apple.
Yeah, and on that point, like when you're looking at the total financial benefit, you gotta look at what do I get at closing, what's the potential of the second bite, but also tell people on the other side, make sure whatever you get at closing, you're happy with. Because that second bite could be huge, it could also not be as big, and you have no control over the timing of when that bite comes. So make sure that you're content with what you get day one closing, but don't be short-sighted and say, hey, look, I can roll X% back in and have a chance at, in many cases, people's second bite will be larger, even 2 or 3 times larger than the first bite.
Mm-hmm. It's an important point. The first company that we bought was in 2017 after we merged 2 companies together, Thrive and another business locally. And that owner had about a $10 million business, you know, a little under 20% EBITDA margins. You know, I think we paid 15 or 16 million, and he rolled about 3 or 4 in. We had a really good exit. We returned about 5.3 times capital. And then he rolled in a bigger chunk this time around. But by the time it's all said and done, that little $10 million business is probably going to net him close to $50 million in capital over about a 6 or 7 year period. So it's really what you want to do with it. But if you pick the right partner that has growth, you're going to get a really good opportunity for that second, third, and maybe even 4th or 5th bite.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, any of our deals, we have a minimum of 30% roll. Most people, on average, probably roll 50%. And it really comes down, I tell people this all the time, and I think part of it is a control thing where they're looking at it as like a one event, it's never gonna happen again, I wanna get all my money and get out. But at the end of the day, the way I look at it is you should want equity in perpetuity forever, as long as that capital partner will let you put $1 in beside their dollar. Because at the end of the day, I look at this and I'm like, they're better at making money than us. And if you have an opportunity to put your money beside theirs, they're going to shepherd it along to a finish. And sure, you got to have a good business, you got to have these things in place, but a lot of the business leaders that I talk to that are thinking about acquisitions, they're thinking of one and done, and I try to recalibrate them to think, you actually don't want to be done. You don't want to be completely out of this game. And then also, even if you got that capital and it's sitting in your bank account, now you become this money manager. You've got to go place that capital to get a better return from the business you just sold from. And you're probably not going to find it other than our industry.
And to that point, how often does somebody knock on your door and say, hey, would you like to be an LP in my private equity fund that returns 25% to 35% IRR every year? Oh, by the way, you can also get salary, you can also get stock options, you can also get bonus, you can still stay with the employees that you know well, and you can continue doing that, and you can continue rolling with a very choppy investment, landscape out there right now with the markets and interest rates rising. It's a pretty safe place to bet on yourself in an industry you know and ride it out for a period of time. So,
it's true.
Yeah. Maybe I'll highlight. I agree with all of this. Particularly culture is huge. Maybe I'll just talk about maybe some non-financial considerations that an entrepreneur should have when they sell their business. And I think maybe the most important thing, aside from culture and making sure your people are taken care of, is what do you want to do next? Okay, because you're signing up for another run if you decide to roll over with the company, right? So what do you want your role to be? How do you envision your career developing in this new world? And being sure that you clearly articulate that as part of your process, because on the buy side, we want to understand, is this person going to stick around? Do they have the energy to do what we want to do? We want to make sure that we're putting them in a career fulfilling environment. So, really taking inventory of where you are in that moment and then looking forward and articulating that to the buy side is I think really important for a successful transaction.
Yeah, I've had a lot of our members over the years have transacted, merged, and sold and stuff like that. And I can't remember who said it, but one of them said that when you sell your company, it's like watching a stranger make love to your wife and do it really, really bad. So I think.
That's a rough one.
That should be on bumper sticker.
Yeah, I know, right?
That's your new tagline.
That's a tough one, Robin.
So yeah, no. So the culture I think is important because I would think that because again I'm just going off what I've heard from MSPs who's old. You put your heart and soul in your customers and your employees, and you want to make sure it's taken care of. Financial, I think that's very important, of course, but I think the other things are.
And I'm sure anyone that's done an acquisition, when I meet these business leaders, they care about two things. They care about their people and they care about their clients. And they're like, what is day two going to look like for their people and what is going to look like for their clients? And so I'm not naive to the fact that you think about they're people that chose to work at a small MSP. They chose to work at a 30-person, 20-person MSP, and all of a sudden it becomes this arranged marriage that now I'm a part of a 1,300, 500, whatever that is, and it's like, I don't know if I signed up for this. And so what I find is most people will give it a chance for the arranged marriage. They're like, well, let's just see if this is a good fit or not. And if the growth opportunities are there and people want that, all of a sudden now it just opens a whole door of opportunity for people that did not have those opportunities yesterday. And I think one of the biggest challenges of owner-operated MSPs is how do I continue to create new opportunity for my smartest people? And at some point, if there is no opportunity, there's not a next step, they exit and they're going somewhere else to find that opportunity.
Yeah, no, I think I agree that growth is important to keep and attract the best people because really good people have options. I mean, you're all offering them opportunities, and why would they come work for you? So you got to think just like customers. Why would a customer buy from us? You got to think employees. Why would someone want to come and work in your organization? I think that's important.
To get back to that original question, it's really important to sit down and again, the money's all going to be there. The rough deal terms are going to be there. It's a hot industry. You're going to get what you want. The question is all these other intangibles, right? It's obviously the employees and the customers come first, but what else do you want to do? What are your goals? Do you want to be part of a region? Do you want to go into a corporate role? Do you have lieutenants that have greater aspirations? Laying out all of those intangibles, hey, what's going to be integrated? What's not going to be integrated? I'll give a shout out to Richard from Integris, who's built a great company in the audience right here. I lost a deal recently to Richard, and I think we were very close financially. We sat down and spent a lot of time understanding their business. We had a methodology, they had a methodology. At the end of the day, they felt like their methodology was better than ours. So at the end of the day, it's really important to have those conversations and to have alignment up front. Because when you have alignment up front, you're going to be much more successful. If all of those things aren't mapped out in a 90-day plan, a 6-month plan, a 1-year, 2-year, 3-year, where everyone knows what they're doing and how, there's an opportunity for there to be fractured and unhappiness with the transactions.
Right.
Yeah, and you really have to be honest with yourself about what you want to do, right? Because I've seen some of our acquisitions that the sellers have loved being a part of our team. They knew what they wanted to do. We had the position for them. They stepped into that role, and they did extremely well with it. And I had one guy that, like, for the first 6 months, every month he's like coming and thanking me. He's like loving what he's doing. Then I have other people who weren't clear what they wanted to do. Maybe they thought they did, and then it kind of changed. And some of those people ended up not being as content, and they ended up in a role maybe that they didn't want to be in. So like somebody said earlier, I forgot who it was, but knowing what you want from the transaction and putting it out there clearly on the front end. And if you're not sure, you should wait, and get that figured out before you end up in a position that may not be what you want.
Yeah. All right, so the big thing, obviously, if you have a successful product to sell, I mean, that's marketing 101. You got to have a good, attractive product to sell. If you think of your business as a product that if you don't sell one day, you buy because you buy it with your, your energy, your effort, your money, your everything. So in order, like they're all trying to grow, right? And I know all of you are doing acquisitions, and now I hear people saying, well, we don't even want to find an MSP unless they're doing a minimum of $1 million in EBITDA. Like, I mean, a lot of people are kind of, that's like the new threshold. So I'm wondering, like, what advice would you have for the people in the room that maybe they're not at $1 million in EBITDA and they're trying to grow, they're trying to compete with you guys? Like, how would they compete with you to get the best clients to build that business that's very attractive for someone like you to come along and buy? I mean, what advice would you give them to compete with you?
Like I started in the conversation earlier, you got to have a plan, right? I'll give you some advice that's going to give you the most value for what you're building. Don't build a lifestyle business. Don't build a business that's based around you. You're the ultimate everything in that business, because when you're sitting across the table with somebody here, that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for somebody that can run a business, not be the business, right? So it's important to build a business. You have to have a plan. Nobody starts a business to say, the day I die, I'm going to die with the business. Everybody builds a business to say there's going to be an exit at some point, whether it's an exit to your employees, to your family, but there's an exit, right? So if that's your plan, then start building that business with that in mind. You know, in our company at UDT, we talk about find yourselves out of a job every day, right? Like find yourself out of a job every day means build a business around you. Don't be everything. If you're everything and you don't build a business around you, then you don't have the ability to grow a business. And all of us that provide a platform for MSPs to continue to grow, we're looking for people like that, because somebody said it, or it might have been you, said it, that we have to continue to grow our management team, because as you get bigger, you have to continue to grow management teams, and you find these gems in these smaller MSPs. But again, you have to build the business, not be the business.
I'll just say, you know, it's never probably been a better time to be an MSP than right now. When I think about benchmarks and what you know, in the early days, nobody even knew what gross margin was, what did it need to look like. It was just kind of like everyone was doing what they need to do to try to just carve off a dollar. But now with peer groups and standards and like, these are all things that none of it's rocket science, but you need to follow it. And so we have this terminology internally. What does a healthy MSP look like? And I guarantee it would be probably right across the board, but gross margins north of 45%, client churn under 8%. If you can do organic growth, so like sales, like actually selling 12 to 15% year-over-year organic growth, if you can make 18 to 20% EBITDA, like these are, I can look at like 5 numbers of an MSP and look at them and say, is this good or is this bad? But those are the things that people should work on. The last thing around sales, we were talking about it backstage, sales and marketing is incredibly hard. This industry didn't start with sales and marketing. It just started with smart people fixing things. And then all of a sudden we had to figure out how to sell. But we all grew up, myself included, in a world where we were taught about principle-based selling. And it was enough as a CEO and owner to kind of fill the bucket every month with 1 or 2 deals. But as you get bigger, and your comment about when do you need a capital partner, I think it's more of like, when do you need a sales staff and when do you need corporate development? Because like selling yourself as a good CEO and closing deals is one thing, but building a sales team is incredibly hard. And I'm sure Rob can attest to this too. Finding salespeople is incredibly hard. We have 30 open recs for salespeople today, and I'm sure he probably has that or more. And so it's never ending around that, but there's this shift that needs to happen from principle-based selling to a sales staff, and that is where everyone gets excited.
And you mean principal, just to clarify, you mean the owner principal is doing all the selling?
Correct,
Okay,
correct.
I just want to make sure that we clarify.
Just to go one layer, I guess, beneath those numbers, I agree with Ryan's numbers 100%. But how do you get to those numbers? I mean, we first put 2 businesses together, our gross margins were 34%, we had negative EBITDA. We did a lot, we were probably 60% recurring, we did a lot of projects, a lot of hardware sales, a lot of T&M. And we sat and looked at it and said, well, our clients hate the T&M. Half the time they're fighting for credits. It slows everything down, it provides friction. We're doing these big projects, we're selling hardware. We got too many project engineers, we have not enough project engineers. Too many project managers, not enough. So we said, all right, we're gonna build a more recurring business. We're gonna shoot for 90 to 95% recurring. And we went out and did equipment-based managed services. Whether you have the capital to do it or whether you can go out and do leases or loans or get debt capital, you build a stack. Build your WAN stack, routers, switches, firewalls, WAPs, and build that WAN stack and then deliver that like, as part of the cable box. Deliver that project is really your onboarding revenue, right? And then your project teams will level out, your recurring revenue, your labor costs will level out, your EBITDA will go up because you're deploying capital one time and you're getting a recurring amount of that capital on growth and equity building as you go. Invest more in cloud and security. For every $1 of revenue that we generate on, I would say, help desk, it requires about 30 to 35 cents of labor. For every $1 we generate of cloud or cybersecurity, it costs 10 or 11 cents of labor. So in a tough market to find labor, it makes more sense to sell more cloud-based solutions, more cyber-based solutions, more software-based solutions, more AI-based solutions, because it reduces your ability to need labor to scale, it increases your gross margin, it removes friction, and it makes it easier to grow and add EBITDA at a high level. So.
Yeah, and I would go a little bit more fundamental than what I agree with you guys have said, 100%. What I find of a lot of people who are at a conference like this, the issue is not a lot of times knowing what to do, it's actually doing it. And usually it's fear is the number one thing. I mean, almost every acquisition that we do, literally every acquisition, we increase prices. And I always hear, the customer's not gonna like it, they're not gonna pay it, we're gonna lose customers, all these things, and we increase the prices, and they always come back and say, hey, we didn't lose any customers, everybody was okay with it. But there's that fear piece of not doing the things that you already know. If you're in a peer group, I'm sure there's things on your list you know you need to do that you just haven't done. You haven't gone and hired that salesperson. You know, you haven't taken that step that you know that you need to do. So prices is one of the, and here's the thing about a price increase. You do a 10% price increase, where does 100% of that go? Straight to the bottom line. So you could have a 10% EBITDA margin today, increase your prices 10%, and now you're 20% EBITDA margin, just like that. And a lot of MSPs don't do that. And now you just doubled the value. That one thing, you've doubled the value of your MSP overnight by doing that. People don't have better contracts. They do month-to-month contracts. Customers won't agree to it. I hear that all the time. And you put it out there. You proceed with confidence. Customers will agree with that. You move to MRR, like, oh, they like the T&M. No. Hey, no, we're going to go fixed price. Show them the benefits. Walk them through that. So much of it is just confidence that I see MSP owners don't do it, and they always fear how the customer is going to react, and they don't do the things that they already know that they need to do.
If you build SLA-driven contracts, that alleviates their fear about, hey, what happens if you don't do the job? What happens if you let me down? Here's an SLA. If we're behind on ticket times, response times, if we don't resolve a down issue in X amount of time, it's a breach. X amount of breaches allows you out of the contract if we don't cure within a certain period of time. Build that in your contract and then try to get a 3-year commitment, at least a 2-year commitment, at the very least a one-year renewable commitment, because you're putting all this labor up front with zero commitment. You're better off doing a handshake than a month-to-month contract or allowing somebody to get out with 30 days out. Yeah. They get all the benefits of everything you built, and they only have 30 days of revenue on the other end. I'd rather just shake their hand and do it word of mouth, or you put a contract in that their responsibilities, your responsibilities. If you don't perform, this is what their options are. If they don't do their responsibilities, that's what our options are.
And when you do the hardware, you can jump into the 5-year contract really easily.
And maybe to round that out, I agree with all the financial metrics that these guys have talked about. One other metric we look at is backlog, right? And backlog is basically, by definition, how much you have under contract that we can kind of look forward and say, hey, that's money good for the next 2-3 years because you've got 3-year renewals or whatever it is like that. So that's another financial metric to just consider in your business as you're thinking about maybe having an event. But just breaking it down more fundamentally to the question that you asked, like, why do folks buy businesses? And then we buy businesses to grow, right? So that might be we need to acquire a capability we don't have. So maybe I need to get into the MSSP business. I am not in the MSSP business, and I find an MSSP. Now I've got that capability that my broader sales force can leverage and sell. In that case, I'm less worried about the MSSP's organic ability to sell themselves. I need the capability that I'll lay into my portfolio and let my whole portfolio sellers go out and go. I may need access to a geography. Okay? In that case, I am going to care about the sellers in region that come with that asset and that I can count on that growing. Maybe I have to apply some methodology to it, but I want to know that there's active sellers in that region, right? So just think about that, right? As we're having conversations with potential acquisition targets, we are doing that so we can go grow our business.
Yeah. All right. So I want to talk about EBITDA because obviously that's the crown jewel. I mean, everyone looks at recurring revenue and EBITDA and these other things. And you're all doing acquisitions, and it kind of ties in, I think, to Fred's opening keynote, which was about lowering costs so that you can increase your EBITDA. What do you guys see as mistakes that the MSPs that you're looking at acquiring, what are they doing that is killing their EBITDA? I mean, you mentioned one, price, so just not, okay, so, do you guys have anything to add to that?
Yeah, one thing I'll talk about is I feel like there's an immaturity, and it's kind of normal depending on where they're at in a size for an MSP, is immaturity in regards to pay bands. One of the things I look at when we start looking at what people are getting paid it's all over the map, and it's emotional raises here and there. And so when it comes into our world, that's certain things that we red circle, like this person is so far out of the pay band, they will never get a raise in the next 100 years in our world. And so you're seeing how those can get out of control, where all of a sudden now, just the cost of labor that somehow is creeped up in the actual MSP starts to really impact bottom line.
Okay.
I would say everything can't be a one-off, right? So when you start a business, a lot of times you're a break fix type of company. You're calling yourself an MSP, but you're doing things just to stay afloat. You've got to build your product lines, and you got to stick with your product lines. Because if you know, every single one is a one-off, and it becomes more difficult. So when somebody like on this side of the table is trying to talk to you, you're like, so what are you selling here? And you have a new SKU for every single customer, then it becomes difficult to scale that, right? So build a product line, stick with the product line. Everything can't be a one-off. It goes back to the same thing. You have to have a plan, because you build something to eventually sell it. So.
And that's a great point. One of the first things we did 6 years ago is we built a product catalog. We automated it so the sales team could go and put a quote out there. If it was red, they couldn't issue the quote because it was below profit margin. It was yellow, they needed X amount of approvals. It was green, they could let the pricing go. But so many companies we acquire, they'll look at it and they may have 5 or 6 really profitable clients, 10 or 15 or 20 pretty profitable, and 20 or 30 that are dragging them down. If you don't have profitability by customer, by SKU, by part number, by what you're doing for them in every single thing, it's really hard to build that business and get the EBIT up to that 20% range or north. But if you have the capability to measure into every single SKU, every product that you're offering, you can add more security tools, more software-based tools, more things to that stack to protect them that increase your gross margins. If you're not measuring all that and making sure that you're profitable, it's an issue. One of the things that we do every year, we sort of have a no a-hole policy, employees and customers. So we'll go around the knock and say, hey, who are the 10 worst customers? And they'll look at each other like, are we allowed to say that? Yeah, let it rip. And they'll just all say out the 6, 7, 8 names. Bang, we immediately send those account managers out. They sit down with those customers. They either raise their spend in areas that they were deficient on that caused problems, they change the way they interact with us, or we tell them to go find a new MSP. And our employees love that. When we get rid of unprofitable clients, you may think they're billing 40, 50 grand a month. It may cost you $35,000, $40,000 a month to support them, and then you have miserable employees and overhead on top of it. They're not worth it. We've fired $100,000 a month customers. If they're not worth it, your employees are getting killed culture-wise, and you're not making money on it, let them go. Yeah. Clean out bad customers. No one that we've seen really does a good job of that.
Yeah. In my experience, when we were talking about price increases, and I was talking to Robin backstage about this, we did a price increase, and it was like a turning point in our business where we raised the prices. And you know, the night before, you're thinking we're going to lose all our customers. Nobody's going to accept this. And guess who left? All the worst customers.
All the bad customers.
They all like, there's no way I'm paying this, and they were
the ones who don't pay on time anyway.
Correct. They were grinding it, and they're using our service desk. So lo and behold, they left, created space for us to now bring in good customers. Our morale of our staff went up, our profitability went up, and the call volumes went down. So like all 3 of those were a win by just raising the price. The other thing I would just say, if you're not doing it today, because I see this in a lot of the MSPs we buy, is they're not good at reconciling. Like all of a sudden I look at a book of business and we're charging 50 users and there are 85 users, and they've been that way for the last 3 years. And I hear it all the time, like, well, if we go back, they're gonna leave us. I'm like, well, what is their option? They're going to go to the market and try to go to these guys and say, hey, we're 50 users. Well, I count 85. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, to me, it's like, congratulations on your growth. We just realized that you now have doubled your size. We're going to up your price, and we're excited to grow with you. Yeah. But it's about kind of this belief. And I have this internal, within my family, we talk about NFRs. And if you don't know what an NFR is negative first reaction. No, that'll never work. That'll never do. We can't do that. And I see NFR, there's a lot of NFRs in our business, in our industry, where it's like, you can do that. We have to be able to believe that, because the successes are out there. You can see it everywhere.
It's the confidence that I talked about earlier. Like that, like the ones who do well are the ones who have that confidence to do what they know that they need to do. But back to your question, Robin. So EBITDA is obviously the most important. But then the second thing that is pretty close is the multiple, right? So you can have a high EBITDA, but if it's all T&M, you're going to get a really low multiple, and your total payout is going to be less. So we talked about some of the things in terms of like how to increase the EBITDA, but the other things we've kind of hinted at, which is how do we increase that multiple? And so like MRR percentage is huge. Your largest customer, you don't want, if you have your largest customer that's 50% of your business, like that's a major negative. You don't want that. You want that to ideally be sub 5%, 10%, could be okay. You want to have we talked about the churn. You said 8%. Like that's a great metric in sort of not having that churn. We talked about the culture fit is a really important factor. So those are other factors that come into play. The margin that you mentioned. Are you getting the good margin both on the customer level and the product level? Like those are some of those other factors. Maybe y'all want to chime in with other factors y'all look at that add to that multiple, even if it doesn't add to the actual EBITDA bottom line.
Yeah, I mean the stuff that we see that leaks EBITDA. Bad customers. Okay, you gotta every single week you gotta look, or every month when you close your books, look at the worst customers and deal with them, confront them. That's one. Not taking advantage of what is probably in your contracts to increase the price as they grow. Like I can't tell you how often, I walk into a QBR and we should be charging this customer. Why haven't we had that conversation? So you probably have a lot of legitimate contractual rights to increase fees that aren't being executed. And then the third thing that I see is giving stuff away, like small projects at the desk that'll just leak time and profitability out of the business, right? So trying to manage those three things, I think, and if you take those three things seriously, you could really do yourself some help on the EBITDA line.
I just want to make one comment. There is such thing as too much EBITDA, and I'll say it this way. I won't even sign an NDA if somebody comes to our door and they're like, hey, we're 29, 35, 37% EBITDA, and they're coming in and you're a $4 or $5 million business. I won't even sign an NDA, and I actually think they're doing themselves a disservice, because what that tells me is they haven't invested in certain aspects of the business. If they're making 35%, congratulations, you got this lifestyle business you can crush. But what it tells me is they haven't invested and hired the people they need to run it. Because they don't have there's no special tool or something that none of us would have access to run a business at that.
Or they're adding back all of their salary as if they're not needed in the business.
And so I look at these scenarios and I'm like, I don't want to spend my entire time trying to convince somebody that they're actually at 20% when they're showing up at 35.
Right. Okay. Now we're obviously at a Kaseya conference, and I know all of you use Kaseya's software. I'm curious what you think of Fred's vision for IT Complete and what he's doing.
So one thing I would say, kind of going back to a point Ryan made earlier about the 50 users, 85 users, we need a Cooper bot for automated billing, right? There's no question about that. You need a Cooper bot for automated billing.
Fred, are you hearing this?
Fred hears it. You got to build that today.
Okay.
Because if they add an end user in, let's say, Office 365, and that automatically goes through the Kaseya systems, and you get that revenue built up in a portal, that's going to remove any confrontation your account management teams have to have any of that. It's going to remove any problems there, and it takes it out of their hands. If it's just automated, it's the contract, there's no argument, it just happens. And if you can remove humans from that and friction, it'll allow you to grow faster. So Cooper Bot will be my number one thing, and really, really excited. We've been a Kaseya customer since the early 2000s. The vision that Fred laid out, and I kidded him last night that this is the single best speech that I've ever seen him do. And I think really on target, really talking about IT Complete, really bringing the platform together, making these integration investments, and building AI and automation to bring all these tools together. I think the future is really, really bright for Kaseya.
Man, wouldn't it be awesome if you were starting one today or early stage today? We all been at this for a while, so we've got, we're very pregnant with other tools and legacy tools. Right now, if you're early stage or just getting one off the ground, I mean, you can really come to Kaseya and get pretty much everything you need to run the business, which I think is it's been an amazing string of acquisitions and stitching that together. I remember 1.0 Kaseya, and look where we are today. It's unbelievable what's happened in this business.
No doubt. And I think, we look at the tool creep. If you've been doing this a long time, like I remember back in the day, and we were kind of early 2000s as well, you had two tools. You had an RMM and you had a ConnectWise or an AutoTask. That was it. Those were your tools. I look out in this, this expedition out here. There's thousands of tools I've never heard of, and so this tool creep that's happening, where they're not nice to haves. They're almost vital to run your business now if you're going to compete. Is becoming it's eroding margins left and right. So when I think of his strategy to to buy the tools, roll them in, and then reduce the price. And I think it was in Vegas the last time he announced a couple acquisitions, and I've never actually seen a business where somebody announces an acquisition and people stand up and cheer and they're like, hey, everybody that's already using this tool, we're reducing your price by 20%. And everybody that hasn't used this tool, we're gonna have it 20% cheaper for you. So this idea to like consolidate and then reduce the tool costs that all of us have to spend, I think is a brilliant strategy, as long as it's good or better than what we're using today. And I think it's just gonna progressively get better and be able to bring the data together. It's the right strategy moving forward. And if you haven't done profit fuel, like these are the things you need to be thinking about. Sure. You need to unpack that. We did it. We found significant savings in certain aspects, but it cost you nothing. Just talk to your rep and make it happen.
How much did you save with profit fuel?
Oh, it was high double digits for sure, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, and it was things, and we at scale, you have, I think we have 70,000 endpoints, so that starts to change things dramatically when you can save even a few pennies here and there.
Sure.
It's just like the price increase. I mean, whatever you save on that tool stack goes straight to the bottom line in terms of the EBITDA. At IT Voice, we're on the Kaseya stack. Use a lot of the tools, love their tools. And I love Fred's vision of bringing it all together, the integrations, where they all tie together. It reminds me a lot of Office 365. And even watching, Fred's vision over the last 3 years, when he first talked about it, I was like, Fred, now this doesn't actually work together, right? But like now it's starting to work together. We keep getting farther along. You look at the roadmap and where they're going to be, later this year, and it's going to have a significant impact. And I think that it's going to be like Office 365, where like none of us think about like selling Outlook or Teams or OneNote or SharePoint. It's just like you just sell 365, and here's all of the, like there's Yammer. I don't even know what Yammer does, but I know it's on the drop down that it's in there, right?
Steve Engage now. It's Steve Engage.
Okay. It's like all these tools that and you get them whether you want to use them or not. I think that in maybe 2 years from now, the MSP tool space is going to be significantly different because of what Fred is doing here, and people are going to be buying suites of tools instead of just buying the one-offs, which is historically how it's happened.
Look, I think the vision is the right vision. When we speak to our customers, we talk about it. There's two ways to approach this always, right? You either go buy best of breed, or what you think is best of breed, or you go buy a platform. They're both going to do the job. They're both going to be good enough, because there's some statistics out there show that 80% of what a software can offer you, you don't use. So by that theme alone, you're leaving a lot on the table. So if you bring a platform together that brings this ease of work, if you're starting a business or you're even in the, it's a no-brainer. You have to go with a platform like this, right?
And I think it's important on that point, if I can jump in real quick. Like when we went through the profit fuel process, we had some of our engineers that like hyper-focused in on a feature. And they're like, well, this makes it easier. I'm like, well, how many hours a month does that save? Well, it saves like an hour. Okay, well, we can save, $10,000 a month if we do that. Like, can we get a workaround? And so, like, you've got to balance the business with the features, because sometimes maybe one has a better feature, but like, what's the total value?
There's always going to be a better software. There's always going to be a better feature. There's always going to be something that some very smart engineer, some very smart help desk person would want to have. The reality of it is, do you really need it to be successful at your business, right? Because you all are business owners and you have a plan, or you should have a plan. If you do have a plan, then you should be looking to have that execute, at that moment in time where you're going to exit the plan. All these tools, all they're going to do is kill your bottom line, kill your business. All of us, when we acquire, we bring into our business, we bring into our platform. We don't take all the tools and we try to streamline. The reason why is because of that. So IT Complete provides that vision.
All right, very good. All right, guys, well, this has been a great interview. I appreciate all of you very much. You'll be around, I guess, if there's questions,
sure,
like later on, because I know I've got to watch the time here. So, all right, thank you all very much. I'll let you all exit. Give them a round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So now you get to vote, all right? So get your phones out. Everybody get your phones out if you haven't had them out already. and I want you to tell me who you think should be the Titan of the industry. So if you're here in the audience, you can either go to mspsuccess.com/vote, or you can use that QR code. If you're watching us virtually, then on the interweb page that's around you, if you're on YouTube, it'll probably be in the comments below. If you're on Facebook, it'll be in the comments. There'll be a link, or you can go to mspsuccess.com/vote and pick that. Do that now. The other thing, just as a reminder, if you go to the next slide, please, if you want the in-depth interviews of the Titans that were up here and others, then you can go to mspsuccess.com/secret, or you can use that QR code. So I hope this was this good? Was this beneficial, helpful? These guys were amazing. Were they amazing? All right, we know how hard it is to run an MSP. You guys know it's a very difficult business, so for them to achieve what they've done, it's pretty significant. So thank you all. I think you're on a break. I appreciate everybody. See you.